Hari Om. This is my part number 24 in English, Comparative Religions, Hinduism versus Christianity. And I continue. Before that, Dirgha Aishman Bhava, Stribhya Dirgha Sumagali Bhava, Sarvavyadi Nivarana Praptirastu, Sarva Aishwaryam Abhivriddhir Bhavatu, Sarve Janan Sukhino Bhavantu Tathastu. So I'm continuing. Now, there could be a lot of claim whether Jesus considered himself to be a God or Son of God, or who was he. Now, if you go into the Jewish original texts, the culture of the Jews is they were a tribal people who were searching for a good living, pastures. They were what you call as nomads. There were lots of tribes who were nomads, shifting from, they did not have their own land. They were shifting from Jordan to Egypt and back and forth, and they could not find their promised land to settle permanently and to commit their agriculture. So everywhere they were seeking for somebody who would lead them, and that person should be a prophet. See, there are various subsections in Bible like Ezekiel and others. I am going to give you some of them, which says very clearly that the culture which they were following. For example, in Ezekiel they call. He says he was a son of a priest, and he says he is the prophet sent by the biblical God, and he was to go to Israel first, which is a rebellious nation, and to tame them. So Ezekiel was one of those such tribes, and probably he was to be sent to Israel. So he was a son of God, and God spoke to him. That's what the Bible, Old Testament says. Zephaniah is again a prophet of God. He's from the royal line. Around 640 years, they say, before the common era, before the Christ-Christian era. Then the word of the Lord came to Zephaniah. And he says, don't worry, Zephaniah, I will sweep everything from the face of earth. I will destroy all mankind in this face of the earth. That's what the Bible's God tells Zephaniah. And God spoke to Zephaniah. And if you take Joshua in chapter 10, and he says in 13-14 verses, Joshua was commanded by God to go to Canaan, another tribal place, and to destroy anything that breathes. So that he was also commanded by God. He was also the chosen prophet of God and commanded by God. So there were prophets being chosen by the God, Bible's God. And they had Moses, who saw God in the burning bush. He was again a prophet of God. Then the Samuel, if you see, these are all subsects text in Old Testament. He was also son of God. And through him, God established the kingdom in Israel, in Samuel. You can read those verses of Samuel. And then you have a lot of this, Isaiah is again a prophet in Bible. In chapter 6 verse 1 it says, in the year King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and exalted, seated on a throne, and the train of robes filled the temple. So Isaiah the prophet sees the God exalted in a glorious way, seated on a throne, and his robes filling the temple. That's what he was saying. But he was also, I will come to you, all these disciples, all these people were really killed in a cruel way. For example, this Isaiah was really cut into two by a saw axe under the orders of King Manasseh, they call. Then, all these, if you see judges, they're all people under the command of God, ruling Israel. Like you have Deborah, you have Gideon, you have Tola, you have a lot of other people. And Deborah is a prophetess to the tribes. She's again a prophetess. So they had lots of prophetess. And Jeremiah, another prophet, he's also God tells him, the Lord tells him, especially in Jeremiah 1, chapter 1, verses we go 2, 3 and all. Before the Lord says to Jeremiah, the God, Bible God says to Jeremiah, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. So maybe God knows, definitely. Before that, there is nothing wrong, but that is the culture of those Jewish people. I knew you, and before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nation. So God gives him full authority to Jeremiah. Again, these are all pre-Christ, Jesus Christ period. Then in Zechariah, there is another Zechariah in chapter 1, verse 1. In the 8 months of second year of Darwin, the word of the Lord was came to the prophet Zechariah. So Lord speaks to Zechariah, Jeremiah. There are lots of verses like this in the Bible in different sects. Deborah, then Samuel, and Isaiah. These people are all prophets of the Bible, through Bible. So, and God speaks to them. They're all the prophets. So that is the culture established. That's the culture is these tribal leaders of those times in Israel wanted some leader, a leader with some supernatural power, probably a king. They were looking forward to somebody to put their weight on them, weight of their hardships, weight of their poverty, whatever it is, to look upon on somebody else in a human physical form. So they were yearning, they were anxiously wanting. And the Bible God tells these leaders, you are my son, you are the prophet, you will lead. So these are all the Old Testament and all it goes. So likewise in the New Testament, if you take, later on, as Bart Ehrman, a very famous Bible theologian, or he's an analyst, he comes to the YouTube very often, a very top class professor in America on Bible studies. He says Jesus was made as a God only in the 8th, 9th centuries. Because he himself says that he is not a God. He is only a son of a God, a messenger of a God. Now, what does Einstein say? Einstein very clearly says in his letter, in his conversation with a Dutch poet. The Dutch poet name is William Frederick Hermans. He says, Einstein says, I seriously doubt that Jesus himself said that he was a God. For he was too much a Jew. Jew means that Judaism, Jew. To violate that great commandment. What is that commandment? Hear, O Israel, the eternal is our God. So God cannot come in a human body form, but the eternity, Paramatma, the eternal is our God, and he is one, and not two or three. So Jesus would never violate that principle. So Jesus would never say, coming into the physical form, I am the God, because that body is not eternal. The body is perishable. Any of the body is perishable. If you come into the spirit, may be eternal, but when you come in the form of a body and talk to people, you are talking through your body. So you are giving an idea that you are talking through your body only. And the body is perishable and the body is untruth. It is not truth. A truth has to be eternal. And he is too great a Jew, because Jews do not accept, because it's a blasphemy. But mainly the missionaries, the Christian missionaries would emphasize on these two verses where Jesus said in John 10:30. I will go to John 10. In John 10:6, Jesus says, 10:16, Jesus says, I am the light, I am the way, I am the truth. That is what he says. That, and then after that he says that nobody, next continuation of the same sentence, nobody can go to my Father except through me. So definitely he has himself agreed that nobody except him can go to his Father other than through him. So he is accepting the very fact that there is a Father above him. And in 10:30 he says, I and the Father are one. Naturally, that is in same St. John only. He has two verses. So these two only the Christian missionaries rely upon to tell that Jesus is God. But Jesus says that I and the Father are one. See, for example, myself and my Father are one only. We have no difference of opinion. I always used to say, we are one. You can talk to either of us. Even brothers will say, sir, we are all one family. You can talk to whatever you talk to him, it is acceptable to be. So that one. But Jesus does not say, I am the Father. I am the God. Nowhere he says in Bible. Neither the four gospel writers have ever written that I am the Father, I am the God. Not at all. Nowhere they have written, because I was checking that everywhere. In St. John 14:6, Jesus says, I am the way, I am the light and the truth. No one can go to my Father except through me. In 14:6, I made a small mistake. In 14:6, St. John, Gospel of St. John. And in Gospel of St. John 10:30, I and the Father are one. These are the two verses which these European missionaries and our Indian missionaries also rely upon. But then if you take 14:6, he is very clearly saying, nobody can go to my Father except through me. So that means, I am the way, I am the light, I am the truth. He's saying emphatically that he is the guide. Like my grandfather was a guide in late 30s to Sabarimala, and he used to say, nobody knows the way, because I only know the way from this place to Sabarimala, because the dense forest, they will mislead you. And I am the perfect guide to my Father, that is Lord Ayyappa. Very correct. That's what Jesus says. He is the perfect guide to his Father in heaven. That's what the next continuation line says. Nobody can go to my Father except through me. So these two verses are also argued like this. And Jesus never said, I am the Father. And in some other place, he has said that you're seeing my Father through me. These verses does not say very clearly, Jesus does not say that he is the Father. And you see some other verses, when Jesus in St. Mark in 15:34, in chapter 15:34, Jesus, when he was dying on the cross, he cries, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. That is in Aramaic. It's not Hebrew, it's in Aramaic. It's a local dialect of Hebrew. That means, my God, why have you forsaken me? That is what in all these chapters they say, except I think in St. John where he says, forgive them for they know not what they are doing. But all the others like St. Mark, St. Matthew, and even in St. Luke, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, Jesus cries to his God, why have you forsaken me? And then he gave up his ghost. That's what they say. But in one verse, in one gospel, I think it is in St. John, he says, forgive them for they know not what they are doing. See, so these are all interpretations of later writings that they thought over and wrote it as if Jesus is telling. Because nobody saw Jesus alive with their own eyes, these gospel writers. All hearsay. And the first printing came only on the 14th or the 15th century, I think, of the Bible, because printing itself started only that period. It was all written by stylus in a bark of a tree or the wood sheets, dried wood sheets in the sun. Okay. Next, Jesus says in St. John 8 and verse 54, if I honor myself, my honor is nothing. It is my Father that honors me, of whom you say that he is your God. So who is the God? His Father. Jesus' Father is a God to people. He's addressing the Jewish crowd there. So he clearly accepts that he has a Father. Then in St. John 10 verse 32, he says, many good works have I showed you from my Father. For which of those works do you stone me? See here, Jesus very clearly, they were when he completed the verse number 30, when he says that I and the Father are one, the Jewish crowd there wanted to stone him because of blasphemy. Under Jewish law, anybody cannot, in a human form, cannot call himself to be a God. God is arupi, formless. That is a Jewish law. It's Abrahamic law. That's how Islam also follows. But here in verse number 34 in St. John, when the Jews wanted to stone him, after verse number 32, in 34 he says, he very clearly clarifies, did I say like that? I am the Son of God, he says in verse number 34 of St. John chapter number 10. And then in St. John 12, chapter number 12, verse number 50, he says, I know that his commandment is life everlasting. Whose commandment? His Father's commandment is life everlasting. And whoso whatsoever I speak, therefore, even as the Father said unto me, so I speak. I am speaking to you what my Father has told me. The Father in the heaven has told me only, I am speaking to you. So Jesus was very frank. He was very frank that he was not the supreme God, but he was only acting on behalf of his Father. Now, if you say again in St. John 14, chapter 14 and 23, if a man loves me, he will keep my words, and my Father will love him, and we will come unto him and make our abode with him. So Jesus says he's the Son of God. Here he infers. So we will come to him. So there are twos, he and his Father. Whereas Einstein says Jesus is too good a Jew that there is no two or three. There is only one. But this is what it is written in Bible. And in St. John 14, chapter 14, verse number 24, Jesus says, and the word which you hear is not mine, but the Father who sent me. Therefore, Jesus clearly says that he is not the Father. And likewise, I can quote on verse of St. John 14, Shloka 28. Jesus says, if you loved me, you would rejoice, because I said, I go unto the Father, for my Father is greater than I. So here Jesus accepts that his Father is greater than I. Therefore, the Father has to be the God. And then Jesus says again in 15:10, in St. John, if you keep my commandments, you shall abide in my love, even as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. So Jesus says he obeys his Father's commandments. So that means if you keep these commandments which are sent to me through my Father has given to me, you love me. That's what he was telling the public, the Jewish public who are hearing his speeches, his prasanga in the gatherings. And when all these things are there, several verses are there which can very clearly point to, as Bart Ehrman says, Jesus was treated as a God only in the 10th century by the Romans, because the Romans historically had a conflict. Whereas if you, with the Jews, and they burnt the temple in 70 AD, that we all know. And Jesus' name was not Jesus, it is an English name. The original name is Yeshua or Joshua or Yeshua or Yehovah. These are all the normal Aramaic names. And now when if you compare with Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan Krishna very clearly says, he accepts, Bhagavan Krishna says that he is the incarnation of God. He does not have anybody superior to him. See, he says in chapter 6 verse 30, Yomam pashyati sarvatra sarvam mayi pashyati tasyaha aham nigraha tasyaham nigraha satcha te na pranashyati. Tasyaha aham na pranashyami satcha te na pranashyati. Yomam pashyati sarvatra sarvam mayi pashyati tasyaha aham na pranashyami satcha te na pranashyati. So yaha mam, yoma means yaha. When you the sandhi will come as yo. Yaha who, mam me. Dvitiya vibhakti. Aham avam vayam mama. So yomam pashyati sarvatra. Those who see me in everything, from tree to stone, to lamb, to wolf, to tiger, to lion, to human beings, everywhere. Yomam pashyati sarvatra sarvam mayi pashyati. In me, mayi, aham, seventh vibhakti. In me, sarvam, if you see in me, all the living beings you can see in me. Tasyaha, to them, of those of them, I don't die. Tasyaha aham na pranashyami. I will not disappear before them. Sachate na. They will not also disappear before me, to me. I will not disappear to them. They will also not disappear to me. Pranashyati means actually perish. Means the understanding is they will not be left alone, abandoned. Abandoned here in this contextual meaning. I will not disappear to them, neither they will disappear to me. For those people, yaha to that fellow, to that one, yaha means it's a ekavachanam, of whom yaha mam, who sees in me sarvam. All those things he should see in me. and all in other things he sees me. And in all the other things he sees in me. So he sees me in every object. That's what they say. We treat every object, Hinduism system is, we worship every object, whether it is serpent or whether it is a tree or whether it is through stone. Everywhere God has to be there. No, he's Sarvavyapi. So Krishna is very clear. He is a form of an energy coming through a figure to just impress upon you. But he says, he is the supreme, he is the ultimatum. So Krishna is ultimatum. And again in chapter 9, I think in verse number 22, Ananyas chintayanto mam ye jana parsyupasate tesham nithyabhiyukthanam yogakshemam vahamyaham aham. I will carry them. No. Anyaha ananyah. Anya means other, no other. An is a Ajadi Pratyaha, Aladi Pratyaya we have in Sanskrita. An is used for all the swaras, a, I, u. And a is used for kaka, cha, cha, tata and the consonants. That gives the opposite meaning. Adi, anadi, anadi. Avashyam, anavashyam, anavashyam, like that. Whereas karma, ka, akarma, not ankarma. So, okay. Ananyas chintayanto mam ye janaha paryu upasate. Tesham of those, Tesham nithyabhiyuktanam, I carry them. For those people who only think of me, not the others. Upasate, worshipping, upasanam, upasate, they say. So one who is worshipping me and not the others, who thinks of me, I will carry them, he says. So, Bhagavan is very clear in his verses. Whereas here, Jesus does not say that he is the God. He says nobody can go to the Father in heaven other than through him. So, what all these things, he says, as Bart Ehrman, you can go to YouTubes and see a lot of other scholars. Most of them, 40% in the Church of England, when they took a survey, 40% did not believe even Jesus existed. It was all created by the gospel writers, they say. But I am not going into those controversies. He must be a very good prophet, a messenger, which was required to control the unruly tribes of Israel in those times. The Jewish tribes, not only of Israel from Canaan, there has been a lot of other tribes there in those areas, Canaanites. And Jesus also scolds the Pharisees, the Sadducees. He never respects them. Because they were all money makers, they were all traders in those own Jewish sections who made money, who were rich. There were a lot of things there. And most of the Jews, even today, they don't accept Jesus as a God. That's why 74% in Jerusalem, in Israel, there are Jews. 14% are Muslims. Only 2% are Christians who follow Jesus Christ. Because they say they to follow as a messenger of God, not as a God. Because in Jewish law, God cannot come in human form and he is arupi, formless. The more of it I shall continue, my dear friends, till such time. Bhuyat tavat shubhamangalam hari om.